Hello and welcome to Why Medics Matter, a podcast for doctors by doctors. I'm Dr. Amie Burbridge.
And I'm Dr. Simon Fraser.
And today we are joined by a fantastic guest. This is Dr. Swetha Batambuze, and she is a SAS doctor and an ophthalmologist. Thank you so much, Swetha, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Amie and Simon. It's lovely to meet you guys virtually.
So, Simon, I'm going to hand over to you.
Right, we're going to be a bit punchy today because I'm hoping this is going to land around SAS week, and that would be controversial. SAS Doctors is a really important role for service delivery.
That's a contentious issue, isn't it, among the profession, Simon? So I was so glad that you mentioned this topic just now, because it's a hot topic among us as ophthalmologists, but also among the whole NHS division and SAS doctors and locally employed doctors as well. And constantly I get emails and messages from candidates, potential candidates for portfolio pathway, but also just specialty doctors wishing to build up their career to specialist grade. And the common denominator is, I am not allowed to train. I am not allowed to expand my experience because I've been told I am here for service provision. And I always reply back with, aren't we all? Every single clinician, worker for the NHS, doctor, secretary, nurse, ACPs, allied health professionals, we are all there for service provisions. We are there to give care for our patients in different aspects. And I mentioned that as a whole to everybody. And then I sort of formulate a response to their managers and to their clinical leads. Sometimes it can come from clinical leads. Often it can come from managers or divisional operation managers within a specialty or department. And I think it was something I was approached and spoken to about when I started the SAS career in 2015. So prior to that, I was a trainee, an ophthalmic specialist trainee, and I was one of those who did struggle for various reasons, whether it be health, family, lack of sort of a base, a home base. I did not find that life suited me. Rotating hospitals every 6 months, rotating around different areas in the region, it just did not suit my personality. I like to know where I'm going to be for the next 2 years. I like that continuity of care. And so when I became a SAS doctor in this trust, it basically was a battle. You know, I'd given up something I had secure. I would be able to become a consultant after a period of 7 to 8 years. And now I was fighting for myself. It was for myself and my patients as well. And I am glad to be a service provider. You can call me that all you want, any day of the week, 365 days a year if need be. But there has to be that balance. There has to be that balance of being educated, being trained, and having a fair sort of exposure to every single thing that you should in that specialty. So I'm an ophthalmologist, and we are very hands-on. We are also very OCD, a lot of us, and I think many will agree to that. And we are very particular. So in all aspects, we're particular, whether it be on our day-to-day clinical basis and work, or whether it be on our surgical experience, our practical skills, our minor ops, our lasers. We do so many things with our equipment in clinic. So we have so many gadgets that we use. And if we are not trained to use those instruments and those gadgets, your career will become stagnant. And you will be that service provider, but then you will not have that job satisfaction. And I think I'm very much agree with the term, but I agree with it on a broader sense, that it has to be incorporated to every single member of your cohort and your team within your department. And a message I'd say to leaders in the NHS, to medical officers, to the exec teams. Often from an executive point, they're very supportive to ensure the SAS doctors are being trained. But when you go to the ground level with managers on the ground, the understanding can change. There's a little bit of lack of maybe cohesive sort of understanding between the sectors. And I think that's where we need to improve things, Simon.
You said a trigger word for me there.
Uh-huh.
Why is it a trigger word? I have some core values, and one of my core values is fairness.
Yeah.
Do we feel there's fairness in the system for SAS?
I wish in 2025 I could tell you there is, but as SAS chair now since 2021, that highlights even more unfairness that exists. And when I work with the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and the other specialities, you see it across the board. So the sort of dialect that comes from the GMC bulletins that you get from the GMC chair represents fairness and represents what they wish to portray on the ground level, but it doesn't reach down to the ground level. And that's where our job comes in as SAS representatives, as SAS chairs, as leaders within this sort of division. And it's improving. I will say it's improving, but it's not there yet. And we have a lot of work to get there. I often hear from leaders, it takes time, Swetha. It takes time to get to where we want. But what they don't understand sometimes is when you've been doing this role for 10 years and your colleagues have been doing it for over 20 to 30 years, some of them, because it goes all the way up to retirement. We know this. And they have struggled. The time has come now. That's the view I have, is there's no time anymore. Because I think I mentioned it recently to a colleague, I feel like sometimes the SAS cohort, it may be a dwindling group of doctors that will maybe disappear soon, because a lot of the SAS cohort now understand that if they do not become a consultant, that they're not treated fairly. So if they did not do CSER, or if they did not do the portfolio pathway to get CCT and be added to the specialist register, that they are treated as sort of not just second grade citizens in the NHS, sometimes third grade citizens in the NHS. And I hear that often. And I have groups of doctors who are doing all sorts of extenuating ways of getting through that system without having a national training number. And my hats go off to them, because I couldn't do it. I haven't got that stamina to do it at this moment in time. I left training because my family came first for me. My health came first for me. But other people have remained SAS because they love it and I love it. So I wouldn't have remained in this sort of area or field if it didn't give me that job satisfaction and that pleasure of meeting my patients. And I've been in this hospital now for 10 years, and the patients know me and my family. They know my kids. They know about me as a whole. And the same with the staff. You end up becoming a very close-knit group by staying in one place. And I wouldn't have that as a trainee. But I'm constantly fighting for fairness. And I'd like to think I manage it in a politically correct way, that it is read better at the executive level, whether it be at senior college level. I've gone from being SAS chair. I've gone from allowing the SAS chair to be represented among the executive committee. And now I'm a trustee at the college. All because it was something that I discussed forward with the execs and the chief execs of that division, of that area and that business, to say you need more representation. And they agree with it. They always agree with it. So from the top, people agree, but in practice, it's really hard to put into that everyday schedule of a doctor. And that's why I love the roles that I do, because if I don't do it, I feel like I'm not doing the job justice, because I don't want people to struggle the way I did. There was sessions when I first started in my job that was constantly put in the emergency clinic, and I was told, well, you're here to do that job. And I said, I've learned what to do in emergency service. I'm not a junior anymore. By this stage, I had 4 or 5 years experience. I'm still learning. I was still learning at that point, but I was more experienced. I didn't need to be in that setting. And it took at least probably from 6 months to 2 years for the department to understand where I'm coming from. But I always had the support of the consultants because they knew where I came from, they knew my background, and they knew my experience. But they also saw my skills on the ground. They saw what the potential could be. And so I always had that support, but it was a constant battle. And it's sad to say that I would say many of my colleagues are probably in worse off situations now than I was. And I feel for them. And I'm a little bit of a sucker for people's stories in the sense that, you know, when they tell me their difficult times, it really gets to me that I want to prevent that to happen or improve their scenario. So anything I do in my sort of leadership role, that's what I try to achieve. I take all those stories, and they're facts. They're not just made up. You know, I see the emails, I see the evidence. And, you know, sometimes, don't get me wrong, there are certain things that are not true. And I have to sift out what is relevant to the role I do at the college and as a leader and as a SAS doctor. But I would like to say I'm trying to make a good change. I would say the response I've got from candidates currently is that, Swetha, don't stop what you're doing, because if you do, I don't think there's going to be anybody else that's going to take that on as strongly as you can or as you would. But I'm trying to mold candidates and future people and future leaders to say, this is what you can do, and this is how you should do it. And I always tell people that if they have a problem, if they feel that they've not been treated fairly, don't go with just the problem. Always have a suggestion or a solution to that issue. And if you approach managers in that way, that give and take, I often find it works. Sometimes you can hit your head against a brick wall and you just want to scream and you just want to walk out and never come back. I know of candidates that are traveling up to 7 hours a day away from their family to carry out possibly 5 cataracts on a list, even less, to achieve numbers and targets that they need to get on the specialist register. Because locally they don't have the opportunity for various reasons, not just because they're not allowed, but because there's no availability. There's that sort of provision is not there for them to train. And then I hear that they're given an opportunity and then it's taken away literally suddenly taken away with a statement saying, sorry, we have to give it to the NTN trainees first. And I completely understand the dilemma between companies and between industry when this happens. But I think from a college level, hopefully we can come up with some plan to sort of prevent that disruption for people. I know of surgeons going abroad and paying £8,000 to £10,000 to train to do a proportionally small number of cataracts to achieve their targets. Is that being a good trainee as such? Is that going to give you the boost in your career long term by going abroad and doing this? You can argue for the numbers, it will, but for the actual continuation of your surgical training, the answer is no. That's not the answer. So you hear of these stories. I have never done it. I've never needed to do it because that's something I fought for when I left training. I said, the only thing I ask of you is you do not let me lose my surgical skills. I'm an excellent surgeon. I've got low complication rates. I started like that as a junior. I wish to carry on. And eventually you can use me here to be autonomous. So I always try and sell myself to explain what they will get out of it. And I am autonomous now, and that's in that sense. And autonomy is a complex term too, isn't it, Simon? It's a debatable term among the SAS profession because you have thousands of doctors who are autonomous but are not recognized for that autonomy. And for SAS Week, that's the whole point, isn't it? Is to highlight such doctors that are achieving these things. And are they getting remuneration for it? Are they getting the right contract? Are they getting the right schedule? Are they getting the right recognition at a trust level or at a national level? So yeah, we need to do better, a lot better.
You've highlighted a really important point that you were supported by your consultants, and things have changed. And you talked about autonomy, and there's the specialty grade specialist. There's a transition from LED. I've understood this a lot of the last few years because I've been fascinated and I've supported it as a consultant. But I think the job in consultant just doesn't understand this. And if people are listening and going, okay, what are the issues here? How would you educate them? What advice can you give them to understand the difference, but also to understand the power of recognizing autonomy properly?
So let's start in the initial grade. That's often you'll find international graduates coming in at. So sometimes it's the locally employed trust doctor levels or the FY3, this sudden new existence of something called FY3.
FY4,
FY4, 5, 6. And again, they're locally employed doctors or clinical fellows. And often they're coming in with probably the 2 to 4 years experience at most in other countries or locally, and couldn't get a national training number because we know the government hasn't produced enough training numbers. We don't have enough to hand out to the amount we're producing. It's a big debate at the moment. And they would be classed probably more as service provision. That's something I started as. And it's poorly understood even by doctors now. But I think they're a lot more well-educated now. They're a lot more aware of the different grades. But consultants still don't understand the difference between specialty doctor and specialist grade. And I know for a fact, we know it's the 12 years experience plus for specialist grade. And I think you can comprehend that autonomy is where you should theoretically have a clinic in your name. So if you're managing your patients on your own, if you're managing a list on your own, if you're not really in a clinic setting with a consultant or another fellow to share, let's say, the knowledge and the help you need to run a clinic to take care of those patients, you're autonomous. You're autonomous. But most of those doctors will still be employed as a locally employed doctor or a specialty doctor. And it always comes down to money, Simon. It always is going to come down to money difficulties within the NHS, because each grade has different levels it can get to, cap of a sort of ceiling cap of their salary. And with that, as people grow, they naturally will always gain more knowledge as they get older in the NHS. That's a natural progression. You're going to see more pathology. You're going to experience more. You're going to learn from your mistakes more. You're going to make mistakes. And with that, however, there's this disconnect of your experience and your knowledge with actually, should a manager be going through, where are you in your career? You know, you get forgotten, not because it's purposely forgotten. You get forgotten because you're doing your job every day. You're seeing the patients. You're keeping them happy. You're relatively happy because you're stable in a career, but also because you've probably had about 5 new managers in the last 3 or 4 years. So a department very rarely keeps a manager or a divisional operational manager. It probably changes every 18 months to 2 years sometimes. And why? Because they have something called career progression. They move on, they upgrade to a different role, they get a higher pay scale, and they get more responsibility. And that is how their job works. Whereas doctors, we are shy. We don't take a job and say, well, how much are you going to pay me for this role? Because you have the standard set, you go in, and then it's people like us, the SAS doctors, that get more complex. for a HR department. It gets complex because you have the variation of 4 years all the way up to retirement. And at that point, you're thinking, what am I worth? What am I worth at this point in my life as a career, as a doctor, and as a caregiver? And life changes too. You get more responsibilities. But that sense of the way managers progress in their career does not feed down to doctors in any sort of set way. It will only feed down if those particular doctors within the department are very well aware and attuned to the different contracts, the different salary scales, your different rules that you can ask for. And not many people do ask for it. You only realize when you start looking around at other jobs or other opportunities in the NHS, you then realize, oh my goodness, what have I been doing for the last period of time in my career? Other than improving my CV, improving my knowledge, and being the best carer that I can be, wow, I've really kind of missed something here. And I would say majority of people do that, but they're also somewhat not given that choice. There's not much cohesive discussion within departments of, right, what's next for you? You know, we have our appraisals. We have our yearly appraisals that are compulsory by every trust. And then we have our revalidation every 5 years, I think it is still. And that goes to the GMC. And I've always used those appraisals when I left training with what's next. So in my appraisal, I've always wanted to answer that question. What's next for me as a clinician, and what's next for me as an educator and a leader? But that's just me because of the way of my background. And I can't speak for every other SAS doctor, but a lot of them have low morale. And a lot of them, I would say, are unhappy because they're not recognized for the work they do. And it always comes down to the words of, well, you have that exam, but not this exam, so we can't do this for you. And I don't know if you know of, a story in the 1800s. There was a professor from the Royal College of Surgeons, and he couldn't pass his exams. But he actually got a doctorate and an honorary degree by them for all the clinical and surgical work he did. And there's a statement I found that he had written saying, you know, exams don't define you. They are a tick box on exercise for your CCT. But if you have your exams, does not mean you're going to be a great doctor or a great clinician. What matters is the care you give to your patients. And often managers forget that it's not just that certificate and that piece of paper that makes that doctor great, or that makes that doctor even substandard. I wouldn't even say compare. I wouldn't even compare it, actually. What matters is on an everyday basis. And it's a shame that I feel like sometimes that isn't always the experience that the doctors are seeing. Is, you know, they give, I think, blood, sweat and tears to their patients. And their patients can vouch for them, and their nurses can vouch for them, and their secretaries will vouch for them. And this is like through experience that I have via SAS colleagues that I've spoken to. And it's disheartening. You know, it's disheartening. Some of them want to leave the NHS for that reason, but I'm making them stay to say, become an educator, become a leader, become something different that will give you different way of seeing things and more job satisfaction, because every career needs to evolve. If you're stagnant, you're never going to be happy. It's just not how human beings work. There will always be a period of every 5 years, every 10 years in your life, whether it be personal life or career. I feel you will always have to find something that you need to evolve into or change. And that could be on paper, it could be your exams, it could be your CCT, it could be your specialist registration, but also could be on a personal level of what you do within your department. And the locally employed doctors, I think they do it for a reason. Sometimes they do it because of finances as well, and also to do with visas. Often that's what they're restricted to. I don't think it should be the way forward in the NHS long term. I think 2 to 4 years, that's it. and then you move on to something sort of standardized like your specialty doctor contracts. But then the argument is, if you go on to specialty doctor contracts, do you stay on that for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years without recognition? And the answer should be no. The answer should be no, and that should come from all leaders. And it's something I'd like to work on with the college, with the GMC, with the roles that I take on and I apply for, to change that. That would be the potential aims, to improve life at every single level. And I always say to our board and our executive committee and our college council at the Royal College, I say, you've got to imagine your groups of doctors that work for you. And I always put them in 3 subgroups. So I've got your juniors, your sort of 2 to 7 years experience. You've got your middle, which is 4 all the way up to 12. And then you've got your 12 plus. And separate your cohort of your workforce and see, what do they want? What do they need help with to achieve that target this year or next year or the following year? Because if you don't have those conversations, people move on, people leave the department, you don't keep a steady workforce, and then they go elsewhere and they do all these little, 2-year posts here and there, finish their CCT, become a consultant. Is that an answer for the NHS? I'm not sure. I think it's nice to keep the same people if they're good workers and if they're dedicated. And I think we should encourage that.
So I always scribble notes during podcasts. Oh, I've got lots of questions, but I'm also aware of the time. So
I'm going to limit you to one question.
One question. Okay.
Your key question, because we've come close to time.
We have. So I'm going to ask one key question then. And throughout you talking and what you've said, it's very clear that you love being a doctor. You love being a SAS doctor. And a couple of times you said, it's brilliant being a SAS doctor. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? What is brilliant about it? And because I agree with you.
Yeah. So what I've loved about it is getting to know my patients and getting to know that family within the department, and having that steady work-life balance. I love that. If I did it for the children, I'm here for them, to drop them off to school, to pick them off on some days, not all days, because I'm late sometimes. But that family work-life balance was really important to me. And I wasn't sort of willing to jeopardize, I guess, family for work, but I found that balance. It took me a long time. It's brilliant in the sense that I go into work happy. I wake up happy and enthusiastic for my day. And my days are very varied. Every day I work part-time, but I also do my leadership roles. And I really enjoy that side of things. And to be that spokesperson. And when I meet new doctors coming into the department, I love educating them. So whether they're training doctors on the NTN program, whether they're new SAS doctors, whether they're new trust doctors, I'm sort of the mother hen, and I will take them under my wing and I will say, right, this is what you need in this department and this is what you need to know. And don't forget to safety net. And, I like to protect them to make sure that they don't make similar mistakes that I maybe experienced years ago. And I love that side of things. But I'd say it's the happiness of waking up and doing that job effectively and being confident and knowing what I'm doing is safe and correct and high level. I'm not blowing my trumpet. I just know I'm a good doctor and I'm a good surgeon. And my patients like me, most of them. There are some that won't like me. You have your days where you're not the best and you can't achieve the best. But the mother hen in me doesn't just come towards my doctors that I help to train or nurses that I help to train or staff that I help to train, my allied health professionals. It also comes from me being a mother hen to patients. To if patients are sometimes not respecting the surroundings and our staff, our nursing staff, I'll put my foot down and speak up for those staff. I'll say, you can stay here and you can keep shouting about the wait and about that, but everyone's trying to do their best. But you cannot speak to our staff like that. And I'm one of those people that won't take that nonsense. And yeah, no, I'm just very happy, I'd say, in that perspective.
Can I
Yeah.
can I jump in, because
Yeah.
I am you've got to the holy grail place,
Oh.
really. You've got to happiness, contentment, feeling purpose, waking up happy, and you've done it through a different career pathway.
Yeah.
If I ask this question of all guests, and I asked this question before Amie does her final sort of summarising the key learning, if you went back, with all your wisdom and experience, and you could have a conversation with the newly qualified 23-year-old version of yourself,
Yes.
what advice would you give yourself?
Oh my goodness, that's a good one. I'd say read the paperwork. No, yeah, I'd say read the paperwork. Write any job you take, make sure you reviewed your contract accurately with a senior, with BMA help, but also do research around it about where it can go in the future. Always know what the future prospects are in whatever you've decided, whether it be 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. And I'd say have that knowledge better known at the beginning. That's probably one thing I've not done very well. Because again, I did, at the time I left training, I didn't have much of a physical choice. I wanted to remain where I am in this town. My mum and dad are down the road. I wanted that lifestyle. I wanted future children to be brought up with them. I didn't grow up with my grandparents because they're in India. But I would say that read the paperwork and also know your worth. Know your worth better. Know what actually you can give to a department, and put that in writing to your leaders and say, right, I'd like to have a meeting, and arrange those meetings every few years to reevaluate where you are in your career, because it's so self-directed as a SAS doctor. You forget that. You forget that actually things can go amiss.
And you may forget your worth if you don't stop.
Yeah, you forget your outlook and you forget that aim, and you will just, and you can plod. I think there was at least a 5-year period where I just plodded along, but that was for health reasons. I didn't have a choice. I had to plod. I had to balance. I had to have surgeries. I had to then put the health first. So for each person, it will be different why they're plodding. Whether it be family, whether it be the children, whether it be family abroad, whether it be family here. But if you're plodding, it's fine. But then find that point in your career or your life where you say, what's next? What should I be doing next?
So what I'm hearing is what's next, and check the agreement and value yourself. Amie, I don't know if you want to just take us to the end of the show just to summarize.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. And I've got lots of different points. I guess I'm going to try and put them down into a little nutshell. What I hear then is being a SAS doctor for you has been a challenging path at times. You've overcome those challenges, but you've had to fight for that. And you've had to be your own spokesperson. And you've really been your own cheerleader, I guess. And sometimes other people where you work, and certainly in different departments, we need to learn to be cheerleaders as well for SAS doctors. There needs to be more fairness, more parity. You've also highlighted that you do leadership roles, you work at the RC Opt. So you've got a huge amount of variety, and that is possible with a SAS career. And I think that's fantastic. Get an awareness of your rights. I think that's really important. I work with a large number of SAS doctors, and we often have conversations, and I'm like, no, that you're entitled to that. This is your right. And I think that's what people often don't understand, is that no, this is your right. You're allowed annual leave. You're allowed study leave. Absolutely. I think you've showed us all that anything is possible, which is wonderful. And one question I had is, we've talked a lot about...
You're not allowed a question.
No, okay, it's not a question then. It's I guess it's a rhetoric thought then. Okay, so
thank you.
I'm going to end on this. We've talked a lot about SAS doctors, resident doctors, consultants. We're very label defined, aren't we, in the NHS? Why?
Oh, gosh.
Why do we hang on these labels? And I don't want an answer, but I'm just going to leave that hanging in the air.
I think we leave that for the audience.
Yeah, just have a think about that.
Why do we put people on labels?
Yeah.
I loved what Swetha said, which is, what do different doctors need at different stages of their career in terms of experience? And I think, let's rip the label off and look at what's behind it.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
That would make the world a better place.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Swetha.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody out there who's listening.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye. Happy
Bye.
SAS Week.